sex, lies, and insider trading.
But what agents found instead of a compromised official account were intimate, salacious emails between Broadwell and Petraeus, described as a lot of human drama.
Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 falls from grace in business and politics.
I made immediate and repeated efforts to save Mary Jo by diving into the strong and murky current.
For this list, we looked at the business tycoons and political power players that reached the greatest positions of authority in government, industry, or finance.
She said a young woman danced while dressed as a nun and stripped for the then Prime Minister. But today's trial is separate from one in which the 76-year-old is charged with paying for sex with an underage prostitute and covering it up.
Held in the highest esteem, they threw it all away because of arrogance, greed, and in some cases, pure lust. Scorned by the public and their peers, they were completely forced out of their positions, or at the very least, judged in the court of public opinion.
It's a terrible mistake, and I'll never do it again.
Number 10, Michael Milken.
And of course, the real-life star from the go-go 1980s who flamed out most spectacularly was Michael Milken. Now a Boston Globe report links Romney to a business deal with Milken. It's the last of a triple hit of negative Bain stories in 3 major newspapers.
They call him the junk bond king. With an almost preternatural understanding of the stock market, Michael Milken made billions through creative investments in cheap, high-yielding bonds.
One of the richest men in the world, Michael Milken, pleaded guilty today to 6 criminal charges and agreed to pay the largest fine ever assessed against an individual.
Then he got a little too creative. A poster boy of 1980s money lust and excess, Milken was indicted on fraud charges. Banned from the securities industry for life, he has since dedicated himself to philanthropic work and remains one of the richest men in the world. Turns out the junk bond king is also a comeback kid.
No matter what it is, prostate cancer, no matter what it is, the man is right there and raises millions and millions of dollars.
Number 9, Dominique Strauss-Kahn.
There's no easy way to ask any of these questions.
There's no easy way to answer.
As managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Dominique Strauss-Kahn caught heat when he had an affair with a subordinate. The IMF finally forced him to resign when he was accused of sexually assaulting a hotel maid.
I was like, I'm so sorry. I turned my head. He came to me and grabbed my breast.
And the case was settled in civil court. He's now been connected to a prostitution ring and faces charges of aggravated pimping.
I wasn't thinking anything. It happened, something happened, which is a private thing. And I still say what happens in a room is a private thing unless the prosecutors find something to tell you that you are going to be charged for something and they have proof of that.
DSK has managed to dodge the legal system thus far, but in the court of public opinion, it's pretty clear that this guy's a creep. Number 8, Ray Nagin.
Ray Nagin sentenced to 120 months, which equates to 10 years.
It takes one to know one. As mayor of New Orleans, Ray Nagin was celebrated for his aggressive fight against city corruption, which is funny because Ray Nagin was one of the dirtiest politicians around.
If somebody says, what happened? What did happen?
Well, in my opinion, I've been targeted, I've been smeared, tarnished, and for some reason, some of the stances that I took after Katrina didn't sit well with some very powerful people.
Convicted on 20 counts of fraud, bribery, and money laundering, Nagin took over $500,000 worth of payouts in exchange for city contracts, even after New Orleans had been devastated by Hurricane Katrina. In 2014, he was given a 10-year prison sentence. Guess the payouts didn't pay off.
So now I'm paying a price for that.
Number 7, Jeffrey Skilling.
If you negotiate hard on behalf of Enron, and if you take a baseball bat to Andy Fastow in a negotiation that benefits Enron Corporation, 23 of the 24 people on that committee will be cheering for you.
Today, Enron is the iconic symbol of corporate greed, and Jeffrey Skilling is the face of Enron. Company founder Kenneth Lay hired Skilling to build up business. Instead, he built a house of cards.
What would happen if the Enron guys got dragged before Congress?
I must respectfully decline to answer, on Fifth Amendment grounds, all the questions of this committee and subcommittee.
Debts were hidden, profits inflated. Once hailed one of the most innovative companies in America, Enron collapsed under the weight of its lies, resulting in the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Though several execs were indicted, Skilling's arrogance personified the nature of Enron's crimes. Set for release in 2019, it's anyone's guess what this guy will do next.
You know what they say, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger.
Number 6, Bernard Kerik.
He ran one of the largest jails in the country, and he's credited with turning it around.
The police commissioner of New York City, Bernard Kerik was nominated by President George W. Bush for U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security in 2004.
There have been a number of people detained over the last 2 or 3 hours at the airports with possibly fictitious identification.
Unfortunately, he had to refuse the prestigious position because he'd employed an illegal immigrant. And he was a really crooked cop.
It's a sad day when this office returns an indictment against a former law enforcement officer, particularly one who served in positions as high as those held by Bernard Kerik.
One of the most decorated policemen in New York history, Kerik was later indicted on 16 counts, including conspiracy and fraud.
Plain and simple, tax evasion is not a victimless crime.
Released from custody in 2013, Kerik wants to repair the criminal justice system. Perhaps he should just try to repair his credibility.
That's one way to look at it, and that's the way I looked at it before I went in. Except the reality is, you want people to be punished. You want to punish them? Okay, punish them. But don't destroy them.
Number 5, Eliot Spitzer.
It's not reasonable, it's not right, it violates the law.
While we could have chosen Sexter Anthony Weiner, whose inappropriate online relationships with several women forced him to resign from Congress, it's this former New York Attorney General turned state governor and then Client 9 that lands here.
In the past few days, I've begun to atone for my private failings with my wife, Soda, my children, and my entire family.
Spitzer built a successful career championing the little guy. But this ethical crusader had a secret penchant for hookers, spending tens of thousands of dollars on high-end escorts over a 10-year period.
For this reason, I am resigning from the office of governor.
Facing impeachment, Spitzer resigned as governor. Though his private predilections tarnished his political persona, Spitzer returned to public life, running for New York City Comptroller in 2013. He lost. People might forgive, they don't forget.
The only metaphor I can think of, perhaps, is Icarus. Those whom the gods would destroy, they make all powerful.
Number 4, Andy Coulson.
He's been arrested for perjury.
Yes.
During a trial where someone else was on trial for perjury.
Yes.
As editor of News of the World, he liked a juicy story. But when it came to allegations of illegal phone hacking, Andy Coulson couldn't quite keep his story straight. Coulson resigned from his editor position when his reporter was caught intercepting voicemails.
That culminated in the hacking of a murdered teenager's phone.
Denying any knowledge of this crime, Coulson started work with Prime Minister David Cameron.
I take full responsibility for employing Andy Coulson. I did so on the basis of undertakings I was given by him about phone hacking, and those turn out not to be the case.
But Coulson did know about the hacking. In fact, he'd encouraged it and was found guilty of conspiracy for phone hacking. A perjurer, an eavesdropper, an embarrassment to Downing Street, Coulson was the tabloid journalist reduced to tabloid fodder.
It would require a remarkably robust editor to say, well, thank you very much, Mr. Murdoch, I'm very interested in that. I'm actually going 180 degrees in the other direction. Be a bold move, yes.
Number 3, John Edwards.
God bless you. Thank you for being here.
He was a self-made man with all-American good looks. He had a loving family with a heart-wrenching backstory. John Edwards was the Democrats' darling, and his eyes were set on the Oval Office. Then he had an affair and fathered a child with a campaign staffer, all while his wife battled stage 4 cancer.
I have no idea what you're asking about. I've responded to consistently to these tabloid allegations by saying I don't respond to these lies.
Repeated lies and a sloppy cover-up only made matters worse.
It's fundamental to how you judge people and human character, whether you keep your word, whether you keep what is your ultimate word, which is that you love your spouse and you'll stay with them.
A cheat, a liar, and a deadbeat dad, Edwards was the ideal political candidate who became the worst kind of political cliché.
There's no question that I've done wrong, and I take full responsibility for having done wrong.
Number 2, Bernard Madoff.
What do you think should happen to him? I can't say it on the camera.
He was the non-executive chairman of the NASDAQ and a trusted financial advisor whose investment firm managed the savings of charities, millionaires, and regular folk.
I'm going to put my money with Madoff because he's on the inside. He can get some of that action.
All the while, Bernie Madoff was actually running the largest Ponzi scheme in American history.
His victims, he said, have themselves to blame. My investors were sophisticated people, smart enough to know what was going on and how money was made, but they still invested with me without any explanations.
A corporate con artist, he defrauded thousands of people out of billions of dollars. But in 2008, the scam imploded. Companies collapsed, life savings were lost, and Madoff was exposed. Sentenced to 150 years in prison, Madoff's fall from grace is more like a full-blown crash into infamy and disgrace.
Bernie Madoff told me that he is happier now than he's been in years. He said, quote, "I feel safer here than outside. I know I will die in prison, but I lived the last 20 years of my life in fear."
Before we unveil our pick for number 1, here are a few honorable, or in this case, dishonorable mentions.
New bombshell allegations, including accusations that Ford consorted with a suspected prostitute, snorted cocaine, drove while drinking, and smoked a joint with 2 women.
And then after lunch...
And that saying that it only makes you better. Right. Oh, my gosh. I mean... Bull? It's terrible.
But you didn't learn anything about...
Fortune.
I'm not a racist. I made a terrible, terrible mistake. And I'm here with you today to apologize and to ask for forgiveness for all the people that I've hurt.
I've exchanged messages and photos of an explicit nature with about 6 women over the last 3 years.
Well, I mean, I don't really want to get into details of any of these lawsuits. I'll only tell you that some of the lawsuits have involved people I've never met. Right, or non-employees themselves.
Barry has weathered years of allegations that he's a drug user. 2 witnesses have even testified to it before federal grand juries. Barry always dismissed the charges.
But I've never bought, used, sold, indulged in cocaine.
Number 1, Richard Nixon.
Above everything else, the American people want leaders who will keep the peace without surrender for America and the world.
Watergate, the word synonymous with political corruption. In 1972, a burglary at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office complex revealed a web of shady governmental operations that were eventually linked to the Nixon administration.
And if these allegations proved to be true, what they were seeking to steal was not the jewels, money, or other property of American citizens, but something much more valuable, their most precious heritage, the right to vote in a free election.
Intimidation, harassment, spying, and a little B&E seemed par for the course with this 2-term president. Publicly shamed and facing possible indictment, Richard Nixon was the only president ever to resign from office.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
Though he wanted to be known for his political accomplishment, it's his personal scheming that history remembers.
Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got.
Do you agree with our list? What backhanded financial fraudsters or duplicitous political schemers have we missed?
I don't think there is a fancy way to say that I have sinned.
For more scandalously entertaining top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.
Oh, and the last thing was Olivia Gondak. It says that I wanted to eat her Olivia Gondak. I've never said that in my life tour. I would never do that. I'm happily married. I've got more than enough to eat at home.